Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'direi Torah.
Amen.
Okay.
And we are now coming to, well, eventually, we're coming to one of my favorite passages in the Torah, which has to do with the manna and what the manna is really about, and in a sense, what the manna is trying to tell us in this life, because in some ways the food that we are able to eat, etc., in a way is also manna, even if it isn't manna in the same way that the Israelites received it. But I think it is also a way in which to try and draw out from us a deep, deep level of the miraculous nature of the fact that we have enough food to eat, assuming that most of us actually do. And some of us, the person who's speaking to you right now included, probably has a little more than enough to eat. At any
How
rate,
does that manna taste? How does it taste?
okay, so all right.
What's it made of?
Okay, so Harlan, let's hold off on that question for a moment, and I
Okay.
hopefully I will answer it. We have just
Okay.
a little bit to do before we get to that, to the man itself. Okay.
Okay.
Vayavo Elima, they came to Elim, Vesham 12 Einot. Let's find out where it is. Mayim, right? There were 12 springs of water, Veshivim Tamarim, and 70 date palms. Vayachanu Sham al Hamayim, and there they encamped by the water. Just that one sentence there. So let's take a look. So again, just to support my contention that essentially we are looking at literature, that the degree about its historicity is not the main issue going on here. The main issue has to do with symbolism and metaphor and truths that it's trying to tell us so that we understand life better. And of course, this is the narrative part. The mitzvot are another more specific way in which we can try and perform the divine will. But regardless, let's take a look at Rashi. 12 Einot, so 12 Einot Mayim, 12 springs of water. Keneged Yud Bet Shvatim, this was in correspondence to the 12 tribes. Nizdamnu Lahem, they came to hand. This is Jastar says that it was an act of divine providence, that each had their own spring of water. Let me just comment on that too. For those of you who know something about the West, you know that water has become, or has for years and years, been terribly important. Abba Eben makes the point that civilization only came about because there was a controlled and a reliable source of water so that people no longer had to live as nomads. And the fact that civilization essentially refers to life in the cities. Cities could not have come about had there not been a reliable water supply. So the fact that there were 12 springs here of water, and of course, a spring is constantly providing water. I think the fact that there were 12 meant the idea that the 12 tribes could get along well, because we know that some of the battles, some of the themes within westerns, movie westerns have to do with water rights, and we know that a lot of ink has been spilled about water rights and battles and things like that. So it could be, I'm just trying to draw out a literary idea that that's why it talks about 12 springs of water, and that, and even just on a pshat level, if that's exactly what we're talking about, the idea was that they were able to live harmoniously. Veshivim Tamarim, and 70 dates. Here we are in the Rashi. Keneged Shivim Zkenim. That would correspond to the 70 elders. So the elders were those, of course, who were responsible for the community, and there were 70 elders that were overlooking and overseeing each one of the all 12 tribes, 70 altogether, so that they did have a forum in which the leaders of the tribes could get together and discuss. Of course, if we said there were six from each one, we'd have 72. So I think we certainly could say there were at least perhaps if we don't count the tribe, well, we still would have to have 12 because we've got the Ephraim and Manasseh, each of which count as tribes, and the tribe of Levi is separate. What I could suggest is that there were five from each tribe, which would make 60, and then possibly 10 from the tribe of Levi, perhaps. This is total theorizing on my part, but here we have, on the one hand, we have separate sources for the people, but also the importance of them being able to get together and discuss common issues. And in a way, we've got the states here, right? The individual states, and here we have the federal government, if you wanted to run a parallel. You know, just again, seeing significance in the various elements. So now we're going to go to the next section. Vayis'u me'elim, and they journeyed from Elim. Vayavo kol adat bnei Israel el midbar Sin. And the entire congregation community of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, asher bein Elim, which is between Elim uvein Sinai and Sinai. B'chamisha asar yom lechodesh hasheni, on the 15th day of the second month, let's say Tam Me'eretz Mitzrayim, from their departure from Egypt. So again, if you know something about this, we just read something about Elim. We read it was important to mention, I believe that it was very important to mention those 12 wells and the 70 date palms, right? And the fact that they're between Elim and Sinai, and we know that Sinai, of course, is the place, the location where the Ten Commandments are going to be given. So there's something about preparation going on here, anticipation, etc. But already some preparation had taken place by that previous sentence that mentioned the 12 springs of water and the 70 elders. By the way, I should mention, because I didn't, the significance of date palms, right? The idea of dates is that they are sweet and they also grow in a very dry country. And the idea, perhaps, that finding a place where justice and equity can take place is something that adds sweetness to life, that allows life to be far more sweet if we did not have that. I'm always reminded, I believe it's a statement, perhaps it's either Proverbs or Ecclesiastes. I don't know exactly the source, but it's one of those two. My sense is it might well be from Proverbs. It sounds like a proverb, but there's certainly Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, and it could be there. And that is, better is a dry morsel and peace therein than a house full of feasting and strife. And I think there is such truth to that particular statement. It is resounding. Okay, so let's take a look at Rashi. B'chamisha sayom, on the 15th day. Nit paresh hayom shel chaniyazo. So he says that this day is specified, right? We mention it because we don't always mention dates on which they encamped, right? Lefi, because shebo bayom, right? Kalta hacharara, because on that 15th day of the second month, the charara, the cakes, in other words, the matzahs essentially is what we're talking about. But in this case, a charara typically means a thick, round cake baked on coals. This is again based on Jastro, right? But that hotziu mimitzrayim. In other words, the victuals they took, right, from Egypt came to an end. They no longer had the bread. They ran out of bread on this particular day. V'hutzrechu laman. And so now they required manna. Lamadnu, so we learn, she'achlu mishayrei habatzek, right, that they ate of the remnants of the dough, okay, according to the version of the Rom, okay, or the Re'am, excuse me, is how it's pronounced, the Re'am. And I may have written, let's see if I have it. Here we go. Elijah Mizrahi, right? This is when he lived. Talmudist and posek means a halachic authority, and a mathematician. He's best known for his Sefer HaMizrahi, a super commentary on Rashi's commentary on the Torah. He's also known as the Re'am, the Hebrew eponym for Elijah Mizrahi, coinciding with the biblical name of an animal, the Re'am, also, which was either a unicorn or something like that, or a large ox. I'm not exactly sure, but it means something like that, possibly to describe his intellect. And I think he is attributed with discovering a way to figure out the square root of two. That was the mathematical part there. So anyway, he has a version, okay, mishiurei hamatzah. So instead of batzek, instead of the dough, we have what left over of the matzah. Shishim v'achat seudot, 61 meals. So from the time they left Egypt, the 15th of Nisan, remember, to the 15th of the second month would be 30 days. So that's 60 meals right there. And then possibly counting the day itself was 61 meals. Now, is there significance to this number 61? If there is, I am not aware of it. I'm not aware of it. But they had, I think the idea is they just had essentially a month and a day's worth of food with them when they took it. So here, main tet zayin be'iyar. Okay, lahem. Okay, sorry, I left out a verse, a part of the words, right? Okay. Vayarad lahem man, and the manna came down, betet zayin be'iyar, on the next day, on this, that is on the 16th day of Iyar, v'yom echad, okay, b'Shabbat haya, and it was a Sunday, the first day of the week. It was kedeita b'Masechet Shabbat, as is mentioned in the tractate Shabbat, and he gives you the page reference there. So, okay, going on. The whole idea, though, is that when they ran out of the food that they had taken with them, God provided it for them immediately afterwards. But of course, we know how one tends to act, right? When the theme is, "What have you done for me lately?" So, Vayi, and this is a Yulonu. This, you notice this here. That's how it's actually read. It looks Vayalinu, is the way it's spelled here with the letters, but you can see the vowels here suggest that it really is supposed to be Vayilonu Kol Adat Bnei Israel al Moshe, regarding Moses, or the community of the children of Israel, against Moses, the al ha'aron bamidbar, and against Aaron in the wilderness. So, you know, they experience these amazing miracles, and then they encounter adversity, and the attitude, of course, is, wait a second, panic, concern, anger, etc. And again, is this talking about us? Is this trying to teach us something about how we act faithfully? That when we act faithfully, we trust that God will take care of us, and that God is going to, that what happens, remember, I think it's Rabbi Akiva who used to say, whatever happens is for the best, that everything that happens is for the best. And to try and essentially learn that lesson and get it into our hearts and to internalize that idea and to take it from there. Va'ilonu, right? And they murmured, Lefi shekala halecha. He's simply saying it's because the bread ran out, it came to an end. Okay. Vayomru alehem, and they said to them, Bnei Israel, the children of Israel said to them, Me, look at this, the sarcasm that they're capable of. Me iten mutenu b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim. It would have been much better had we died, right? Or in fact, Rashi's going to talk about mutenu, and mut is a noun, right? So in other words, that we would experience death rather than die as a verb, that we would have experienced death at the hands of God be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. And this isn't enough, as if that isn't sarcastic enough. Look at how people have short memories and how, look at this, as you're going to see. Beshiftenu, when we sat beside al sir habasar, the flesh pot, right? The pot of meat, ba'ochlenu lechem lasova, and when we ate bread to satisfaction, right? In other words, they're revising. This is so current, right? How one can review past events and totally twist them around, right? They were suffering under the slavery, but their recollection of their experience in Egypt was that they were relaxed and had lots of food. Okay. And of course, we know that they had to eat matzah because they didn't even have time given to them to bake bread so that it could rise. Because bread, regular bread, takes a couple of hours, right? Several hours to be able to bake it. But this is what they're saying. Look at this. It is so current. It is amazing, right? Uh, Okay. Ki hotzetem, that you took us out, Otanu, El Hamidbar Hazeh, to this wilderness, Lahamit et kol hakahal Hazeh barav, in order to kill this entire group of people with famine, with hunger. Look at this. The nature of this particular complaint. And it's actually stunning how it describes this. Mi ten mutenu. So Rashi's going to help us translate this more accurately. Shinamut, okay, mutenu means that we should die. So mutenu, right, could mean in the past tense, right? Something like that, all right? But in this case, he's saying namut means that we will die. Sorry. Gosh, I am so sorry. I got confused, and I said that mutenu here, okay, right here, right here, mutenu was a noun, and he says point is that it isn't. My short-term memory, unfortunately, let me down. But anyway, ve'eno shem davar, okay, and it's not a noun. So he says mutenu is a verb that we die. So again, this allows me to highlight the fact that I ran into a mistake, but please understand. So Rashi's telling us that mutenu is a noun, is a verb there, and not a noun. Kamo mut, so say motnu. So if he means a cholam, which is an O sound, right? So it's mutenu is what we have here, but he says here motnu. Ella, okay, however, with a cholam. In other words, not mutenu, but motnu, although I've never heard that word, I must say. Ella kamo asotenu chanotenu. These are examples, giving examples of where these are now, they're nouns, right? Where they're not saying we did, but our deeds, something like that, right? Chanotenu, our encampments. Shuvenu, our return. La'asot anachnu lachanot. Okay? So, in other words, where it says chanotenu, right? It means la'asot anachnu lachanot. In other words, for us to make an encampment. Anachnu, anachnu lamut. I think this is it. Let's see. Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry. Again, no punctuation here, so I'm going to go back on this. Asotenu, chanotenu, shuvenu. So, asotenu means la'asot anachnu, for us to do. Lachanot anachnu, for us to encamp. Lamut anachnu, for us to die, right? Or to experience death. The Targumo, right? And if we look at the Aramaic translation, Levi, would it be de mitana? So mitana again would be a noun form. The natan, the aleph at the end, I believe, in Aramaic represents the definite article. So definite articles apply to nouns. Kamo lu matnu. So, halavai v'hayinu metim. Again, he gives us a different way of understanding this in the sense of just other words to understand it again as a noun. Would it be that we were dead? Okay, that we were dead. So again, just being careful about the grammar. He's just being very, very careful about the grammar. Let's go on. Let's see what we can go on to. Okay. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. And God said, the Lord said to Moses, Hashem said to Moses, Hineni, behold, mamtir, I am going to rain, rain, lechem min hashamayim. I'm going to rain down bread for you from heaven. V'yatzah and the people should go out, v'laktu dvar yom b'yomo, and they should gather every day's worth, each day's worth. Okay? Leman anasenu, in order that I test him, hayelech betorati imlo, will he go with my divine instruction? Will the people, in fact, follow my divine instruction, imlo or not? So what we're going to see and is that there are rules regarding the collection of the manna. And here they are getting manna from heaven. Consider that, right? They don't have to work for it. They don't have to, the only work they're going to do is to collect it, okay? And there are some rules involved. And are they willing to follow the rules to collect it, to get it? So again, this is a literary description of our own attitudes about following rules. Okay, so davar yom biyomo, each day's worth, right? Something each day. Tzorech achilat yom. In other words, the needs of that day, the amount of food for a day's worth. Yilkatu, they should collect biyomo on its day. Velo yilkatu hayom letzorich machar, and they shouldn't collect today for tomorrow's needs. In other words, they have to just collect one day's worth of food. Leman anasenu hayelech betorati, in order that I can test him, will he in fact go in with my divine instruction? Im yishmeru mitzvot hatloyot ba, if they will observe or guard, keep those commandments that are dependent on it, shelo yotiru mimenu, that they shouldn't have leftovers. In other words, they had to consume just a day's worth each day and not leave anything over for the next day, which would be an act of faith, you understand, right? V'lo yetzu b'Shabbat lokot. And on the other hand, they shouldn't go out on Shabbat in order to collect the manna. And I will just anticipate what it's going to tell us, because it's saying on Friday they to collect a double portion because it wasn't going to fall on Friday. Again, there's some really deep issues going on. Now, Harlan asked me what the manna tasted like. Well, there's a depiction of it in the book of Numbers, which basically was like honey wafers. It tasted like that. There are also other traditions that say it basically tasted whatever flavor you wanted it to taste, except for onions and garlic. It did not have those kinds of flavors. Why? Because in complaining about the manna, the Israelites actually complain about the manna and the fact that they missed the onions and the garlic. And the reason it didn't taste like onions and garlic is because the food that a woman eats when she's nursing can affect the taste of the milk. And that's why it didn't taste like onions and garlic back then. So with that, we will close for today. And I will be happy to meet you in a couple of days for the next little part here. Okay. So here we go. It's about to tell you about Friday. So I'm going to stop the share and ask you if you have any questions or any comments you'd like to make. Morris?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. Number one, it's striking to me that um, the voice of the people is we. Who's the we? Who's speaking on behalf of the entire community. I mean, it's a collective we rather than a spokesperson. That's
Right,
one.
right. I think they're clamoring, Morris. At least that's the description. That's how the description comes to me. Think about what's going on these days where people are protesting. Okay?
Well, that was my second comment. That
Yes.
I think I think the reason that there could be such an outcry is because it's mob action.
I agree. I
So it
agree.
sort of combines that we. I'm not sure if it does that, but I was wondering what you thought about the we. But I
Hmm.
do think that the answer to how could they be so unappreciative? Because if you've got, whether it's 600,000 or 3 million, depending on whose version you take,
Sure.
there's a crowded area. And a lot of people who are not happy, they feed off of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
No, thank you for bringing that out. I think it's not part of the description I was sharing, but I think you're bringing that out. And you can only imagine Moses and Aaron trying to face this incredible mob of people who are, not trusting them, etc. I think we live in a time when there are protests going on. And the question is, and our Constitution, I think, very, very wisely wants to give people a chance to let off steam and to express their unhappiness. I think that's part of the brilliance of the Constitution of America and the people who founded this country. But on the other hand, we have to look, if in fact the leadership deserves to be trusted or whether the leadership doesn't deserve to be trusted. And we have an example of Moses and Aaron having proved themselves, right? That God acting through them, proving themselves reliable and trustworthy, and nevertheless, the lack of faith on the part of people, the natural human reaction, etc., to an immediate problem, we see this very clearly. So I don't think the Torah is against, legitimate protest. And in fact, we'll see later on in the Rashi how God reacts to two different protests and why God reacts in that particular way. So hopefully we'll get to that. Okay, I'm going to stop the
okay.
recording with this.